Being in the military is extremely rough. Oftentimes, the training involves long distance hikes carrying tons of equipment, brutal exercises, long times out in the field, and all sorts of other things. But there's a common element that also brings it together that happens very frequently on U.S. military bases: Sasquatch encounters. Tonight we are talking about the United States' very own military encountering the eponymous Sasquatch. Hi, I'm Kazario Okora, and welcome to Southeast Bigfoot Research Organization. So we're not going to beat around the bush. It's been a while since we've done some real encounters and reports, so I'm going to throw it to Jaster here. He's got one from where?
Right now we're going to talk about, really quick, we're going to open up the one that we had up in North Alaska, okay? And we had a full deep dive on that one.
Yeah, this was back in our Bigfoot Geography series.
Yes, so we're going to bring that back if you guys would really like it. We just kind of want to experiment with other kind of formats and shows, so if you want some more Bigfoot Geography, comment down below. So, we're taking you back up really quick to northern Alaska, what we consider to be the northernmost encounter of a Bigfoot in the United States, okay? Not to mention, this was a Special Forces captain who he and his squad went hunting these tracks that they had found, okay? And during the tracking of these footprints, some things started to become noticeable to these men. Now, these guys are not people that were brand new to the Special Forces scene. These are people that, in their own account, these were hunters of men, right? These people have done this before. They know what getting tracked feels like. And the one thing that they all discussed whenever they were like, hey, what do you think we should do here, is that none of them had enough of a firearm on them to deal with multiple bear-like or bear-sized things. So they decided to move back. Now, this happened way up north. I'm going to go ahead and put it on the map there. I'm going to do some researching and get it back up there. So this happened way up there, okay? This is where people go out to do intense training missions, okay? Like crazy training missions. Now, that's not it, okay? The big thing that we're going to talk about today is that, like, this is a phenomenon that has happened over decades, over multiple different war theaters, and multiple different training areas, okay? That our boys in uniform tend to get into situations with these things, most likely because of how remote they get out there, how far they get sent, right? And because of that, they go into places where the regular Joe isn't normally at. And that's when these weird things start to happen. So, if you want to hear a more in-depth version of that encounter, we've got a link to it here. I'm going to put it up there. Well, blam. You can go ahead and catch the full encounter up there, along with the other encounters from North Alaska. They are really crazy. And we'll go ahead and pass it back to Kaz really quick. But beforehand, if you made it this far, if you like it, go ahead and comment, subscribe, and like, all that. But go on ahead, Kaz. Let's go ahead and talk about some more military encounters.
Okay, so these next encounters that I have were a couple of reports collected by a gentleman known as Doug Trapp, based out of Dallas, Texas. He and his friend talked to a bunch of gentlemen who worked at Edwards Air Force Base. Edwards Air Force Base is it's up in, I believe, northeastern California.
It's in the desert of California. I think it's closer to Los Angeles.
Yes, yeah. Mm-hmm. It's out in San Bernardino. It's in Kern County, and the eastern is in San Bernardino County. It kind of straddles three different counties. This is where the Air Force Test Center, the Air Force Test Pilot School, as well as NASA's Armstrong Flight Research Center is. It's also the Air Force Material Command Center as well. And a lot of commercial tests happen out there as well. So So this encounter, so there are three different encounters that Doug writes about here. I'm going to go ahead and start reading it off here. The sun dropped quickly behind the desert rock piles, revealing a deep red glow to the western sky as Corey Rudolph and I made camp at the east end of Avenue J in Palmdale one spring night in 1977. We have been visiting the area as often as possible in response to several credible Bigfoot reports in the California desert. So we're talking about desert Bigfoot here, which is one of my favorite subgenres of Bigfoot reports.
Definitely.
To the east was nothing but dark black sky with thousands of stars and periodic meteors whizzing by. Our objective was twofold. One, to observe all we could during the night, and two, to get away from the Los Angeles rat base. We had been driving through the areas north of the mountains separating the Los Angeles area from the desert clues, and people to interview who claimed to have encountered a desert Sasquatch. For the next 3 years, Corey and I, and sometimes myself with my faithful red-tailed hawk, Nixon, we gathered as much information on desert Sasquatch activity as we could. He's got a pet hawk. Dude, that's awesome.
This is crazy. This is main pro tag material right here.
Oh, absolutely.
As far as Bigfoot is concerned, this is crazy.
In many cases, the witnesses told very similar tales of large, hair-covered, man-like apes observed crossing the highway or looking in their windows at their homes, usually after midnight. That's my... I don't know if you know this, but for the longest time, my most recurring type of nightmare was, something peering in on the window at me, because where my bedroom is in the house, since I have the basement apartment, my bedroom window is right next to the alley that goes down into the backyard. So it's literally at ground level. So somebody could literally just peer in. I've had nightmares where a zombie was peering in. There was a xenomorph there one time. I don't think I have ever had a Bigfoot appear in a nightmare. It might have been a Dogman, but I don't know. There's just something scary about the idea of somebody looking into your home, you know?
Yes. Being in a place where we had weird activity. I also grew up in a basement where we had a ground level single panel window. Wablam, you know what I mean? Yeah, I made sure we put blinds up in there. Let's put it that way. I was not.
I've got
having those.
Yeah, I've got really big fucking blackout curtains on mine. Because it's like a full ass window. Anyways, through these witnesses, we slowly became aware that the military, just north of Lancaster, California, and Edwards Air Force Base, had been witness to these desert man beasts for several years. We finally made contact with 3 different military security officers, all of which did not know of the others, who provided us with information relating to what the Air Force knew about these animals. Before I continue with this, I must inform the reader that these 3 men were willing to discuss this with us only because we promised to never reveal their names or ranks, and if we did, they would deny everything. Because I believe in keeping promises, I will comply with their request, but I will refer to them only by rank, since I do not believe that their stats at the time would indicate or reveal their true identity, thereby keeping my promise. I also add that I have spoken to 5 additional ex-military officers who were once stationed at Edwards Air Force Base, and they claim that what the first revealed was accurate, and that not much has changed there since the 1970s. The first I interviewed was a lieutenant in charge of security in the sector of Edwards AFB near Rogers Dry Lake. He was primarily responsible for supervising the surveillance activity from sunset to sundown, from 72 to 75, when he was then transferred to Germany, then retired. This gentleman explained to me that the base security was primarily involved with monitoring for unauthorized entry to the base by curiosity seekers. The base was highly involved with classified secret aircraft testing at the time. Sorry, pardon my yawn. And there were many curious people trying to take photos or just see these things. In addition, the base had a very high level of UFO activity, or as he put it, alien spacecraft. This is something that still happens. There are a lot of reports of UFOs that happen over military bases. I think the only other places where in terms of frequency of UFO reports is higher is areas around nuclear reactors.
Right. The hard part about that to me though personally is you can't, especially where there's a NASA research facility at that particular Air Force Base, you can't scratch out the UFO being American, right? No matter what it is, the Nighthawk looked like UFO, I get it. If you don't know what Starlink is, could you, let's bring this up for UFOs really quick. Say you are someone who grew up in an uncontacted tribe, right, in the Amazon. And you look up one day, last Tuesday, right? You look up, and 12 flying Doritos in a goose formation is flying through the night sky. That looks like UFOs. Like, I'm not gonna lie. Like, I saw a video of my buddy recording Starlink heading over his house in like 10 o'clock at night in a lit neighborhood. It still looked like UFOs. I'm not gonna lie. It got to the point where someone had to go, no, that's Starlink, and you heard some guy in the back go, oh wow. But no, like, it's something that is very prevalent, especially that time, in that time, the 1970s. Are you kidding me? That was in the hype train of aliens and UFOs in the USSR, you know what I mean? All of that was tearing up at that point in time. Like, I do think that leads to another part of the conversation where you're always going to get it, right? Like, the supernatural part of this, where it's like, why are UFOs and Bigfoot always together, or very frequently together at the very least, enough for it to be a pattern, you know? And I'm not sure about that, but I do know that these guys are people that are willing to talk about something. Now, I do understand if they're career individuals that they aren't going to admit to it until after they're retired. Because who would want to ruin their career over something like this, you know? But, like, also, can I throw out something real quick before we get back into it? This dude was explicitly like, I'm going to reveal their ranks only because I feel like that's not going to paint their identity. Then he proceeds to say, well, it was a lieutenant in this sector that would go during this shift, this time of year, during these years. It's like, dude, you painted this dude with the biggest spotlight I've ever seen. Like, if you didn't reveal his name, you gave him everything else. You know what I mean? They got you. like, no doubt if this ended up somewhere, he got a knock on his door. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like, there's no way he didn't. But I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah. So, picking up from where Mr. Trapp left off, in fact, he made it clear that these craft were not from Earth and that the Air Force knew very little about them. When any unauthorized people or alien craft entered its perimeter, he was to report to higher command and observe. All of his personnel had top security clearance and were discussed nothing of what they saw. He further described some of these craft to me, but I was not very interested at the time. Gonna throw tomatoes for that. Come on, Mr. Trapp.
Right.
While they were conducting surveillance one night, always using starlight scopes and motion detectors to spread threat space, one of the guards reported an infiltration in his perimeter. When he asked for details, the guard described a very tall man, but not really a man. Perplexed by such a report, he decided to drive to the location and talk to the guard, perhaps thinking the man had lost his marbles. When he arrived, a wide-eyed guard met him and repeated his story. The lieutenant began to scan the desert for the intruder and soon spied him. Or it. Through the starlight scope, he could clearly see that this was not a man. So, starlight scopes, I think these actually came up last time we discussed like military encounters.
Yeah, I believe they're low light, like long distance binoculars, right? Or something to that effect.
Yeah, basically.
Like they're supposed to operate at nighttime and still give you the ability to see long distance. So what we got is the captain or the guy in charge, right, gets a call from one of his security officers. Hey, I got something weird happening. You need to come down here. And the guy's like, oh my God. So he drives down there. And the guy's all like wide-eyed, crazy. He's looking like, oh my God, I saw something weird on the starlight scope. So he's probably yanking this thing out of the dude's hand like, come on now. This is probably just a vagrant or a crackhead or something, right? Points over to where the dude is telling him it's at, and he sees it, right? He sees the same thing. So Grunt Dude is not crazy at this point, correct?
Yeah.
I'm catching it right?
But this is where it gets wilder. Both men continue to observe the animal as it wandered around almost aimlessly. He then reported to his superiors of the activity and was told to keep the animal in sight. This was no problem as the animal remained in the area. About 5 minutes later, a helicopter was heard approaching the area. Then it was seen coming in fast from the east. They continued to observe the animal, which continued its activity. The helicopter came in over a rock pile, then the animal spooked. It looked at the helicopter, turned, and ran in like a deer around a rock pile and out of sight. The helicopter searched the area but never found the animal. The two men could hardly believe what they had seen. The next day, the lieutenant reported to the command post the previous night's activity. The command told him these animals had been seen on the base before, and the public knew them as Bigfoot or Sasquatch. The command explained that they were concerned that these animals may be related to the alien craft, and all such reports must remain top secret. He was told to continue to observe and report, but not to intervene or disturb the animals until the command determined what they were. The lieutenant had heard of Bigfoot before, but not in the desert. He'd always thought that this was some sort of fable or hoax, but he knew what he saw and knew they were real. Through the following years, he and his crew observed the Sasquatches on the base several times. By 1975, they had sophisticated equipment, including video surveillance cameras mounted in key areas. And they explained to me they had videotaped these animals several times, but the tapes were classified and held under top security at all times. The time he left Edwards, they had learned very little about these creatures, but his feeling they were not UFO related, but biological living beings. Dude, they sent a black helicopter after it.
I mean, it makes sense to me personally, because, like, you're not going to get, like, are you going to, what, get a crotch rocket? The Humvee is not getting there in time. You know what I mean? Like, outside of a jet rocketing over there, how are you getting there fast enough for that thing to be where you're saying it is and get eyes on it? That's kind of hard. I understand the helicopter now a little bit better. But, like, also, if you're trying to keep these things at a distance, you're going to want to shock and awe these things, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And I don't think a Jeep full of dudes with a machine gun is going to do it the same way an Apache helicopter will do it, you know?
Yeah.
Like, that'll work. Like, that works on a lot of stuff, you know? So, I get it. The thing that I was about to be like, ooh, look, I seen it, was that apparently Command was also like, are these related to the UFOs?
This lines up with a lot of other reports I've heard out of Edwards and similar bases. It seems to be a pretty, like, routine approach to these things. Especially Edwards and the other, like, U.S. bases in the desert area of the country.
What I'm understanding, though, is that most of these desert encounters seem to be happening at night, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, I'm not crazy. Like, the only way that they would be able to utilize stealth would be the cover of night. Like, you wouldn't, there's no cover to utilize outside of rocks in the daytime, and, like, they might be doing that. But it isn't like they're just, you know, spider crawling along the desert floor in the middle of the daytime. That's not what happened. They ain't got no video of that. But they've got plenty of nighttime stuff, from what I understand.
Mm-hmm.
And what also seems to be something that I heard on Edwards Air Force Base from another encounter was that they keep all security camera footage of these things top secret. And it does,
they literally just said that in the report I read.
Exactly. Like, what I'm trying to think, though, is that, like, that might not be as ridiculous as you would think, because I think we talked about this before. Anything that could pose a potential security threat would be considered top secret, right? Unless it's, like, an identified animal, you know? But if it's not, you don't know. Especially if you got a bunch of vagrants or random hippies running around in the mountains over here trying to get a video of a UFO. You don't know right off the rip if that's a human or not, or if that's a hippie or not, or if that's a spy trying to get into and videotape part of the Air Force Base. That's another thing they got to worry about, right? So, like, it doesn't surprise me that got relegated to top secret information, but the fact that it's considered common knowledge and just the culture around there is a little weird to me.
It is, yes.
Like, oh yeah, we just got Bigfoot around here. It's like, wow. Like, we just don't talk about it. You know what I mean? Like, what? Like,
no, if there's one thing that I've become very surprised by in listening to a lot of and reading to a lot of, like, paranormal encounters that enlisted have, whether it be reading Tales from the Grid Square, listening to wartime stories, or, like, you know, reading on other sites, is that there are quite a couple of, like, bases in the United States that just, like, kind of have a reputation to them, like, yeah, weird shit's out there. There's a couple of bases that everybody knows are, like, haunted for sure. I was just listening to one that's like in the EOT base.
Mm-hmm.
There's something out there called the Box Witch, which is this just like hag that seems to haunt the area, and like she screeches at night and she laughs and like she sometimes looms over people and does all sorts of stuff. Really weird. And then of course there's areas like Edwards where Bigfoot are just like kind of a common thing out there that they know about. So
It's a wild, wild world to live in.
yeah, for real. So continuing here, the second officer I interviewed was a major before he too retired in '78. He had served at Edwards from 1970 through 1978 and was in charge of one of the command posts on the north end of the base. He too explained that they were primarily interested in UFOs and aliens. In fact, it was through his words that I first heard the term EBE, which is apparently the military term for aliens or extraterrestrial biological entities. I don't think they use that term anymore.
I definitely haven't heard it in modern times.
Because I think they used a different term for like anything for life forms during the congressional hearings.
Yeah, I think they use the phrase like what, extraterrestrial biologicals or something to that effect.
Yeah, I think they've just taken off the entities at the end and just had like called them biologicals or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
It's been a while since I took my notes when I listened to that. So anyways, it is only in recent years that this term has been coined in UFO books relating to the military UFO cover-up. In any case, the major confirmed what the lieutenant had told me, but added that these creatures also found their way into the secret underground tunnels that run under Edwards. Although the use and existence of these tunnels was classified, he told me about them knowing that their importance was a moot subject to me. He said they had surveillance cameras in the tunnels and had in fact videotaped them as they wandered through them. He said they were not concerned with the Sasquatches on the base because they learned they were not related to EVE activity and that they were certain they were simply undiscovered animals. When I asked why they had not captured or killed one in order to prove the existence of the world, he returned they could not reveal anything that happened on the base. He said if they were to admit these creatures after wandering around on the base, the public would lose confidence in their ability to keep it secure. This in turn would give people the idea they could do the same. Since there was so much secret work continuing on the base, it was not in their interest to discuss the Sasquatches with the public. They wanted to keep people out, not encourage them to visit in search of Sasquatches. They had enough problems with UFO seekers or those wanting to get a peek at a secret aircraft. I mean, that makes sense, because these reports so far were from, like, the height of the Blackbird program and stuff like that. So they were very conscious about people getting onto their premises, because, like, these were supersonic aircraft they were working on. And, you know, maintaining the perimeter was super important. What always gets me about this one, because I've heard this report before, is the fact that the Sasquatches somehow get into the underground tunnels and they just kind of wander around.
Like, yeah. Like, I mean, to be fair, if it was hot as crap outside or if there was a weather event, like, that would be an opportune place to hide. Like, I mean, to be fair, I would hate to be the dude trying to inspect the tunnels and blam, you know what I mean? That
turn the corner and there's the Sasquatch, yeah.
Like, I'd be letting my nine loose real quick in that situation. Like, oh no, holy shit, that's a bear or something. You know, no way.
Yeah,
I would hate to do that. That's a horror movie waiting to happen. You know,
absolutely.
Ooh, okay, go on ahead.
The third man was a security grunt. That is what he termed himself. In the military, when people call themselves a grunt, they usually to explain like the term grunt, that usually means infantry. It comes from like the sound they would make carrying their like gear.
It's basically any lower enlisted person that isn't really in charge of anything besides themselves and maybe a couple of their buddies.
Yeah, more or less, yeah. He claimed to have seen these desert Sasquatches through starlight scopes on scores of occasions. This individual was only about 19 years old, but extremely military in his self-presence. He called me sir until I asked him not to. Good man. He told me that he'd seen a couple of Sasquatches that stood over 10 feet high. Oh, we got some 10-footers here.
Yeah, that's wild.
Had seen obvious females, one with a young one walking with her, and once saw a group of 5 Sasquatches walking together, all over 6 feet tall, with the tallest about 8 feet tall. They were fully hair-covered except the palms of their hands, the base of their feet, and their face. He said their face resembled an ape with very small eyes, a flat nose, and ape-like lips. The arms were long and slung down to the knees. He said their feet were like ours without an arch, as they had tracked them through the desert several times. When I asked him about the surveillance videos, he told me he knew them but was not involved in that. He said only officers were allowed to videotape the creature's UFOs. Cameras are not allowed on the base in the hands of the grunts. He said he felt very privileged to have seen these animals with such clarity because he knew there were several like myself that would do anything to see one. However, he suggested these animals were not as rare as people assume, but they are very shy and almost strictly nocturnal. They could be photographed given the right opportunity, but those opportunities were rare because those creatures are very good at remaining concealed, even in the desert. He told me the reason they were on the base was that they knew they would not be harmed. He thought that somehow they could feel danger or even pick up on human thoughts. So if the officers and grunts on Edwards were ordered not to harm or intervene with the creatures, they could feel this vibe and felt protected. Some of these animals, of course, wander around outside the base, but these animals are always watching their backs, he explained. To conclude this report, I should advise that several sources have told me in recent years that the desert Sasquatches are still being watched at Edwards AFB. In fact, one officer recently told me the base security actually appreciates the presence of the Sasquatches there, since they give the officers some, air quotes, needed entertainment. The question came to mind. Could the EVEs be just as interested in the Sasquatches as they are of other base activities? The officer stopped for a moment thinking, then said simply, perhaps. Douglas E. Trapp, Dallas, Texas. So, that last one in particular is super juicy because, well, hello, 10-footers, oh my gosh, we got some real giants here.
Yeah, that's crazy. You don't see that very often, and when you do, you usually see that in the north. Like, ooh, I would hate to see something like that. Something that's got 3 feet on Shaq? No thanks. That dude's got 3 feet on me. Are you kidding me? Like, no thank you. I am not dealing with that. Like, could you just imagine? Like, there's multiple people that I've heard witnessed in an interview a family unit of them moving into an area or something.
Right.
It would have to be the soldier's sense of security that most people don't naturally have, that allowed them to be able to see that and maybe be by themselves or maybe have one other person around them and be clearly outnumbered and not just have a fear response, you know?
Right.
Like, plenty of people that have had that experience themselves freak all the way out. And it's a unbelievable thing for them. It changes their whole life. A lot of them can't go back in the woods anymore. Now, it would be wild to be able to see something like that and be able to get some footage out there to the public. But I do understand, like he said, in the height of the Cold War era, like, secrecy is key. It was then. It definitely is something that today we don't necessarily think about as strange.
Yeah.
But, like, I can understand why. I can understand why they don't really talk about that outside of, you know, individuals coming forward. Especially if they have a lot of secret stuff going on. Can't have random people milling about looking for big monkeys in the woods. I would be one of those people. So, I don't know. But let's go ahead and travel to the other side of the world real quick. Don't you think, Kaz?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
So,
load the houseboat up, baby.
Oh, yeah. So, while we're on the way, we'll go ahead and talk about one of my favorite subsections of Bigfoot, okay? And that's the the East Asian Bigfoot, okay? In particular, the Vietnamese rock ape. Because we've got people from both sides of the conflict that have similar stories. And in some cases, people that have served on both sides of a battle being able to say, hey, what was that? You know what I mean? Like, when we were shooting at each other, something just started throwing rocks at us, right? Now, this isn't just a one-off occurrence, okay? This is something that's happened for a long time. It's happened to a long time for the locals, to the point where they call them, let me look over here, make sure I got this right. I am not good with that name, okay? Well, we call them rock apes, okay? We're going to go on that one. So, we're going to get into the specific story of a guy named Gary Linderer, okay? And this guy was a 6-man... He was in command of a 6-man long-range reconnaissance patrol with the 101st Airborne Division, okay? and he was in South Vietnam when he deployed. And while he was out during this deployment, he ran into what he called a deep set eyes on a prominent brow, 5 feet tall, with long muscular arms. It's like, okay, what is that exactly? So it sounds like, to me,
Yeah.
whenever this guy's like going through the underbrush, instead of like, you know, the jump scare when you like in the movie, whenever you turn around and the killer's right there, he basically peeked in through the underbrush and came up onto one of these rock apes. Okay, he's describing it as around 5 foot tall, deep set in eyes, prominent brow ridge, and long muscular arms. Okay, I think the only thing that makes this not Bigfoot like in the profile is the height, right? Like, these are consistently not 8 to 10 feet tall in these accounts. What the thing is, though, is that they're populous. There's a lot of them. And when there tends to be multiple of them, right? So, when this guy gets back to his battle buddies, he told him he just saw a rock ape, all right? But this guy that he was talking to, he'd also seen rock apes before. And now he said, "Hey, that's not what we're seeing here. We're seeing something else. I've heard this before. We're in a different part of the world, okay?" So they continue on, and they see them more along the road, okay? Now, this article that we're going into and we're kind of showing here with MSN kind of goes into the entirety of the rock ape phenomenon, okay? Now, the thing that I want to talk about is that it's not just soldiers in the Vietnam War that talk about rock apes, okay? In the 80s, there were multiple Vietnamese scientists, okay, environmental researchers and ornithologists from Hanoi that people had sent down there to research the phenomenon, and they had come across footprints of what they consider to be a rock ape, okay? Now, what makes this really weird to me is that when you account for the scale and the fact that this thing's 5 foot tall, right? It's not going to have a 10 foot tall Bigfoot's footprint, right? That would look a little goofy.
Absolutely.
These things had a very similar foot morphology to what you would consider Bigfoot over here in the West, right? The only problem was that it was the size of a human's foot. It was just really wide compared to ours. It was like twice as wide. So that kind of adds a little bit to the mystery to me, okay? We've got a situation with the Vietnam War where people on both sides of the encounter can say, hey, while we were out there fighting, we had seen something weird. Something was throwing rocks at us, and in one case, I'm pretty sure, I'll throw it up here if I can find it, there were an account where there were American and Vietnamese forces actively fighting, then all of a sudden, they get third-partied by a bunch of rock apes. And everything goes just absolutely hog wild. Mm-hmm. Now, that goes through what I kind of wanted to talk about. Is that, like, this phenomenon is very much a worldwide thing. And we're going to get into that with later episodes, because I got a really interesting one for Europe planned. But this is something that has happened for a long time. This is something that our soldiers have seen for a long time. And in a lot of cases, this is something where multiple armies on the side of a conflict, which is something kind of unique, can say, hey, we had an encounter. Now, I'm going to go ahead and pass it back to Kaz, unless you got anything you kind of want to add to the rock ape conversation.
Not particularly. I've made it a point of any time I meet a Vietnam veteran to ask, like, hey, did you ever hear of rock apes while you were over there?
You get any?
Now, granted, the last time I met a Vietnam veteran and asked him this, it happened to be the mean old motherfucker that I worked for last summer while I was doing my private home, private caretaker job.
I guess he didn't.
He said, "What the is a rock ape, and I said, all right, never mind.
Yeah, that's fair.
Look, sometimes you just gotta shake the tree and see what falls out, you know?
Oh, yeah. Like, I feel like, depending on what you see, and depending on who you're talking to and what they did and what they saw, you might be able to find something. Like, I honestly ask, I'm like, now mine, I'm always like, hey, I'm just going to ask because I know I'm fishing here. But have you ever, or any of your buddies ever seen anything weird while you were out training or you're out there doing something weird? And they're like, no, but I know people on the periphery that may have had, but we always just thought they were weird. You know what I mean? Now, I've never got to actually meet anybody in person that actually got to have an encounter while they were actively in the service. We did have an interview last year where somebody that later went on to be in the service had an encounter when they were 9 years old. But I don't necessarily consider that the same thing, you know what I mean? So what do you got for me now?
I mean, that was the main thing I had on hand. That one had 3 different reports in it, so I brought that one to the table.
Well,
it was a 3-for-1 deal, you know what I mean?
Hey, we're doing pretty good. So, with that, I think we'll go ahead and wrap up out of this episode of, well, Bigfoot Encounters, I guess, I don't know. This episode of the Southeast Bigfoot Research Organization's Campfire Talks, I guess. I don't know. We'll figure out something for this. But if you've made it this far, consider like, comment, subscribe, and joining the Bigfoot tip line. You know what I mean? We'll have our contact info down below if you'd like to submit your encounter to us here, and we might even be able to put you on the show. So, with that, my name is Jaster, and this has been me and Kaz with the Southeast Bigfoot Research Organization once again, and you all have a wonderful night. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.